I made this quilt with my own two hands for the newlyweds, Margaret announced to the entire family reunion, proudly displaying my handcrafted heirloom masterpiece, the one I'd spent 6 months creating with arthritic fingers that ached through countless winter nights. I'm Evelyn, 67, and that was the final straw. My hands didn't shake as I sipped my lemonade. My voice didn't waver as I complimented someone's potato salad. The only sign that my daughter's mother-in-law had just claimed credit for my life's finest needlework was a slight tightening around my eyes. 3 decades of teaching high school drama had taught me timing was everything. I watched Margaret bask in unearned praise while my daughter Catherine shot me a panicked glance across the lawn. "Let her enjoy her moment," I whispered when Catherine rushed over. "I've been documenting everything for months. It's time she learned who she's dealing with." The quilt incident wasn't Margaret's first theft, just her boldest. For 5 years, I'd watched my daughter's mother-in-law systematically claim credit for my contributions while Catherine pretended not to notice. It began with small things. The secret recipe lemon bars I'd sent for her grandson's first birthday appeared on Margaret's Facebook page. Everyone loved my special lemon bars. When Catherine mentioned they were actually mine, Margaret laughed it off. Oh, but I added my special touch. The special touch was store-bought powdered sugar dusted on top. Then came the hand-knitted baby blanket for my second grandchild, the one I'd stayed up nights finishing despite arthritis flaring so badly I could barely hold the needles. 3 weeks after I gave it to the baby, Margaret posted photos calling it my labor of love for my precious grandbaby. Catherine texted me, "Mom, please don't make this an issue." That's when I started my documentation system. I wasn't raised to make scenes. My generation was taught to smooth things over, especially with in-laws. But after teaching high school drama for 30 years, I recognized a performance when I saw one. So I began keeping what I called my Margaret file photos of my work in progress, dated receipts for materials, even videos of me completing projects. "You're being paranoid, Mom," Catherine said when she caught me photographing stages of a handmade Christmas stocking. "Margaret just gets excited about family things." What Catherine wouldn't admit was that the pattern had been escalating for years. Her husband, Tom Sweet but conflict-avoidant like his father, would shrug uncomfortably when Margaret claimed credit, then change the subject. "Your mother-in-law has quite the creative reputation," my neighbour Judy remarked after attending a community craft fair where Margaret displayed her quilted table runner one I'd made for Catherine's anniversary. "I didn't know you gave her lessons." I hadn't. The runner featured my signature applique technique that had won ribbons at the county fair 3 years running. "Catherine, she's displaying my work as hers at public events now," I said during our weekly coffee date. My daughter stirred her latte, avoiding my eyes. "Can't you just be flattered she likes your work enough to show it off?" The truth was more complicated. Catherine was pregnant with their 3rd child, and Margaret had offered to help with the older kids during her difficult pregnancy. "Please don't rock the boat right now, Mom," she'd begged. For my daughter, I stayed quiet, but I kept documenting. The subplot thickened last Thanksgiving when Margaret's sister Elaine pulled me aside. "I've noticed what Margaret's been doing with your handiwork," she whispered over pumpkin pie. "It's not right. She did the same thing to our mother took credit for her recipes, her gardening. Mom never confronted her, and Margaret just got bolder." Elaine slipped me her phone number. "This family reunion coming up, Margaret's telling everyone she's bringing her special contributions, just so you know." 2 weeks before the reunion, Catherine called in tears. "Mom, I don't know what to do. Margaret's telling everyone about her quilt for the newlyweds. But Tom saw your sewing room when you were making it. He knows it was you." "What did Tom say?" I asked quietly. "Nothing. He never says anything when she does this." Catherine's voice cracked, but this time he looked at me like he expected me to say something. That night, I reviewed my Margaret file 5 years of meticulous documentation. Photos, videos, text messages, dated receipts. I even had witnesses. The family reunion was in 3 days. Enough, I said to my reflection. You didn't spend 30 years teaching teenagers about dramatic timing for nothing. The Margaret situation had finally reached its third act. 3 weeks before the family reunion, Margaret launched her masterpiece, a private Facebook group titled Margaret's Handcrafted Family Treasures. The cover photo was my quilt prominently displayed. Inside, photo after photo of my work, each captioned with elaborate stories of her creative process. Everyone keeps asking about my quilt techniques, she wrote under a close-up of my signature bullion knot roses. Can't wait to explain my special methods at the reunion. I'd expected this escalation, but watching Catherine's reaction was the real revelation. She called me within minutes, voice tight. Mom, I'm looking at Margaret's Facebook group. She's claiming she made your pinecone wreath too. The one you spent all December crafting after your arthritis medicine changed. I'm aware, I replied calmly. I've been taking screenshots. This is insane, Catherine whispered. She's telling everyone she'll demonstrate her signature quilting technique at the reunion. Mum, that's your technique. Progress. My daughter was finally seeing the truth. The subplot thickened when Margaret's husband, Frank, called Tom that evening. Apparently, Margaret had been boasting about her quilting to Frank's sister, Doris, who'd been a professional quilter for 40 years. Doris had questions, very specific, technical questions that Margaret couldn't answer. Frank sounds worried, Catherine reported during our Sunday call. He asked if you might be willing to teach Margaret some basics before the reunion, so she doesn't embarrass herself. I nearly choked on my tea. He wants me to teach her my techniques so she can better pretend they're hers. I told Tom that's ridiculous, Catherine said, surprising me. Mom, I'm sorry I haven't stood up for you before now. The Friday before the reunion, Margaret's sister Elaine appeared at my front door clutching a bakery box. Peace offering, she said, revealing lemon squares. And information. Over coffee, Elaine revealed Margaret had been in a frenzy all week. She's been watching quilting tutorials online, practicing frantically. Yesterday, she stabbed herself with a needle so badly she needed a tetanus shot. Elaine stirred her coffee. Remember those Christmas stockings you made for the twins? Margaret told everyone at church she'd made them. Pastor's wife asked her to teach the women's group her technique. I raised an eyebrow. And? She claimed arthritis flare-up, Elaine smirked. But she's been telling everyone she's bringing her special handcrafted display to the reunion. She bought a presentation board and everything. This explained Catherine's text from yesterday. Mum, Margaret just ordered custom labels that say, lovingly crafted by Margaret, to sew into your quilt before the reunion. You know, Elaine said, leaning forward. Our cousin Judith is coming. She was there when you won the county fair ribbon for that exact quilting technique 5 years ago. I smiled. Is she now? My Margaret file had grown impressively, each credit theft documented with photos of my work in progress, material receipts, even time-stamped videos of me creating pieces. The final edition was a small photo album, pictures of me at craft fairs, quilting circles, and teaching workshops over the years. The night before the reunion, Catherine called. Tom finally saw it, she said quietly. Margaret asked him to help carry her crafting supplies for the demonstration tomorrow. He recognized your sewing basket, Mom, the one Grandma gave you. Margaret somehow got a key to your craft room. I heard Tom's voice in the background. Tell her I'm sorry. I should have seen this sooner. I'll be bringing your things back tomorrow, Catherine promised. And Mom, I've been thinking about what you said about timing. Oh? I kept my voice neutral. Some stories, Catherine said carefully, deserve the right audience. 30 years teaching drama hadn't gone to waste. I knew my cue when Margaret announced to the assembled family, "Everyone gather on the back patio. I've prepared a special presentation of my handcrafted treasures." The reunion was in full swing at Frank and Margaret's sprawling backyard. Picnic tables groaned with potluck dishes, including my potato salad that Margaret had already claimed as an old family recipe I've perfected over the years. Tom had visibly winced when she said it. Catherine had returned my sewing basket that morning, her eyes apologetic. "She had a copy of your house key made from ours," she whispered. "Dad's furious." Margaret's crafting display made my blood run cold, a professional trifold presentation board covered with photographs of my work. Below it, a table showcased my quilt and other projects, each bearing freshly attached, lovingly crafted by Margaret labels. "Before we begin," Margaret announced imperiously, "I want to thank my wonderful family for supporting my creative journey." She patted her husband's arm. Poor Frank looked confused, glancing between the display and his beaming wife. From across the lawn, Margaret's sister Elaine caught my eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Behind me, I heard Catherine murmur to Tom, "Mum won't make a scene. She's too dignified." They didn't know about my 30 years directing high school drama productions. I knew exactly how to orchestrate a third act. "This stunning quilt," Margaret was saying, running her fingers over my bullion knot roses, "took me months to perfect. Each stitch represents—" "Excuse me," came a voice from the back of the gathering. Cousin Judith stepped forward, squinting at the quilt. "Isn't this Evelyn's technique, the one that won at the county fair?" A perfect opening. I hadn't even needed to plant it. Margaret's smile froze. "Oh, Judith, how lovely to see you. No, this is my original design." "That's strange," Judith continued, moving closer, "because I distinctly remember admiring this exact pattern when Evelyn won the blue ribbon. Even took a photo with her and the quilt." The gathered family shifted uncomfortably. Margaret's cheeks flushed crimson. "Perhaps it looks similar," she stammered. "Great minds think alike." That was when Catherine's oldest, my 13-year-old granddaughter Emma, piped up with the innocence only children possess. "But Grandma Evie, isn't that the quilt you were making when I helped you sort the fabric scraps? You let me place the rose patterns." Perfect timing. I hadn't coached her children simply speak truth. Margaret shot Emma a look that could curdle milk. That's when my daughter finally found her voice. "Mom," Catherine said loudly, turning to me, not Margaret, "isn't that your sewing basket under the table, the one Grandma gave you?" All eyes turned to the unmistakable wicker basket with my mother's hand-painted violets decorating the lid. "Yes, sweetheart," I said calmly, speaking for the first time. "It appears to be." "This is ridiculous," Margaret sputtered. "Frank, tell them how hard I've worked on these pieces." Poor Frank looked utterly baffled. I've never actually seen you sewing, Margaret." The subplot I hadn't anticipated was Margaret's own cousin Doris stepping forward. Professional quilter's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Margaret, if you made this quilt, you wouldn't mind demonstrating your bullion knot technique for us. I've been trying to master it myself." Margaret's face drained of colour. "Or perhaps," I said quietly, stepping forward with my Margaret file, "you'd like to explain these dated photos of me creating each piece? Or these material receipts? Or perhaps—" I set my phone on the table and pressed play on a time-lapse video showing me completing the quilt over months of work. Family members gathered closer, murmuring as they examined the evidence. Margaret's nephew whispered loudly, "Aunt Margaret did the same thing with Mum's jam recipe at last year's church bake sale." "The Christmas stockings for the twins," Catherine added, voice gaining strength. "You claimed you made those too, Margaret." I watched my mother's hands bleed from the needlework. The dam broke. Suddenly, everyone had a story. Margaret claiming credit for casseroles, garden designs, even a hand-knitted sweater Frank's mother had made before she passed. "You've all misunderstood," Margaret cried, backing away from the table. "I was merely showcasing family talents." "By sewing your name into them?" Tom asked, holding up one of the custom labels partially attached to my quilt. Margaret's carefully curated image collapsed in real time. She looked wildly around for allies and found none. Even Frank was staring at her with dawning comprehension. "How could you do this to me?" Margaret shrieked at me. "You've turned my whole family against me." "No, Margaret," I replied quietly. "You did that yourself. I just provided the evidence." As Margaret fled into the house sobbing theatrically, her sister Elaine approached me, shaking her head. "She's been doing this her whole life, taking credit, rewriting history. No one's ever called her out so completely before." Catherine wrapped her arm around my shoulders. "Mom, I'm so sorry I didn't believe you." In the background, I noticed Emma carefully removing Margaret's labels from my handwork. Frank stood shell-shocked by the grill, being consoled by his brother. Family members examined my documentation, exclaiming over the proof. "You okay?" Tom asked, approaching with a glass of lemonade. "I'm just fine," I answered truthfully. "Truth has a way of finding the light." Through the patio doors, I caught a glimpse of Margaret watching us from inside, her face a storm of fury and humiliation. The confrontation was over, but the aftershocks were just beginning. The aftermath of Margaret's public unmasking resembled the quiet after a tornado debris everywhere, family members speaking in hushed tones, and the strange absence of the storm herself. Frank found me as I was carefully wrapping my quilt to take home. He looked shell-shocked, a man whose reality had just been fundamentally altered. "Evelyn," he began, his voice unsteady. "I need to ask you something. The Christmas stockings for the twins last year, the ones Margaret claimed she slaved over for months?" "Mine," I confirmed gently. "Took me all of November with that arthritis flare." He slumped into a patio chair. 38 years of marriage, and I never knew she was capable of this level of— "What would you call it?" "Theft," I said simply. "Of credit, of recognition, of truth." Frank nodded slowly. "She's upstairs, refusing to come down. Says she's been ambushed and humiliated. Claims you've been jealous of her relationship with Catherine for years." I couldn't help but laugh. That's quite the rewrite of history. Meanwhile, family clusters had formed across the yard, some examining my evidence file, others sharing their own Margaret stories. Catherine was in the kitchen with Tom, their voices occasionally rising enough to catch fragments. "Can't believe I didn't see it. And all those times Mom tried to tell me." Margaret's nephew approached with Emma, my granddaughter. "Mrs. Evelyn, Emma tells me you taught quilting at the senior centre last winter. My daughter would love to learn. Would you consider teaching her?" Before I could answer, Margaret's cousin Doris joined us. "Evelyn, I'd recognise your bullion stitch anywhere. You won the blue ribbon at the Tri-County Fair with it in 2018. I was second place, remember?" "I remember," I said, smiling at the unexpected validation. The reunion was transforming before my eyes, no longer Margaret's showcase for stolen glory, but a genuine reconnection. People who had previously interacted with me only through Margaret's narrative were approaching directly, curious about the real person behind the handcrafts they'd admired. Catherine emerged from the house, eyes red but composed, and pulled me aside. "Mom, I don't even know how to begin apologizing. All those times I dismissed your concerns." "It's in the past," I assured her. "No," she insisted. "It's not that simple. I prioritize keeping peace with Margaret over standing up for you, my own mother. That's not something I can just brush aside." Tom joined us, looking simultaneously guilty and relieved. "Evelyn, I've spoken with my father. He had no idea Margaret was taking your things. Apparently she told him you two had a crafting arrangement. You enjoyed making things but didn't want recognition. How convenient, I remarked. We've been enabling her for years, Tom admitted. Always smoothing things over, never confronting the lies. Dad says it started small after they got married, taking credit for her mother's recipes, claiming she'd planted gardens her sister had actually done. The subplot I hadn't anticipated was Elaine approaching with a stack of photo albums. I rescued these before Margaret could hide them, she explained, opening to pages showing a much younger Margaret claiming credit for various projects. She's been doing this since we were children. Our mother noticed but said confronting her would only cause drama. That's exactly what Margaret counted on, I observed. The fear of causing drama keeps everyone silent while she rewrites reality. Catherine flipped through the albums, pausing at photos of Margaret showing off her crafts. Good Lord, these are Grandma Jean's needlepoint pillows. I remember her working on them when we visited. As dusk settled over the reunion, a new drama unfolded. Margaret finally emerged from upstairs, dramatically composed and clutching a small gift bag. She approached me with the regal bearing of a martyred queen. "Evelyn," she announced loudly enough for nearby conversations to pause, "I feel terrible about this misunderstanding. I never meant to upset you by sharing your beautiful work with the family." "Sharing?" I repeated. "Yes," Margaret continued smoothly. "I was merely displaying your lovely handicrafts. If you felt I was taking credit, that was never my intention." Several family members exchanged glances. Frank looked away, embarrassed. "The custom labels with your name?" I asked quietly. Margaret's smile tightened. "A simple mix-up at the craft store. The videos of you claiming my technique as yours? Enthusiasm, I get carried away promoting family talents." Catherine stepped forward. "Margaret, we all heard you. We all saw the evidence. Please stop." Margaret's facade cracked slightly. "Catherine, dear, surely you understand. I was only trying to—" "No," Catherine interrupted firmly. "No more excuses. You took my mother's work and claimed it as your own. Repeatedly. You need to apologize. Properly, not whatever this is." She gestured at Margaret's performance. Margaret's lips trembled. For a moment I glimpsed something authentic shame, perhaps, or the realization that her carefully constructed narrative had crumbled beyond repair. "I'll be going home now," she announced, handing me the gift bag. "Perhaps when everyone is feeling less hostile toward me, we can discuss this rationally." Inside the bag was a small embroidered handkerchief store-bought, but lovely. The note read, "Sometimes sharing credit is the kindest approach to family harmony. M." Even in attempted reconciliation, she couldn't admit the truth. As Margaret departed with Frank following reluctantly behind, Catherine squeezed my hand. "She'll never truly apologize, will she?" "Probably not," I acknowledged. "Some people can't face their own reflection." "Well," my daughter said with newfound firmness, "that doesn't mean we have to keep staring into a funhouse mirror." 3 months after the family reunion confrontation, my daughter Catherine called with news I'd never expected. "Mum, we're moving to a house just 10 minutes from you." She and Tom had found a charming craftsman-style home, far enough from Margaret to breathe, close enough to me for Sunday dinners. "Frank called Tom last night," Catherine explained. "Margaret's been seeing a therapist. Frank insisted after she tried to claim credit for Cousin Doris's anniversary cake at church and got publicly corrected." I set my teacup down carefully. "People don't change overnight, Catherine." "I know. But Tom wants the kids to have both grandmothers in their lives, just with proper boundaries this time." Proper boundaries. At 67, I finally had them. The family had reorganized itself around truth rather than Margaret's fabrications. Holiday gatherings now rotated between homes with clear expectations about who was bringing what and proper credit given. Frank called me directly one evening, his voice heavy with the weight of decades. Evelyn, I want to apologize. I watched Margaret take credit for your work for years. I told myself it was harmless, that it made her happy. I never considered how it hurt you. Why now, Frank? I asked. The therapist asked Margaret to list her actual skills versus ones she's claimed. He sighed deeply. The first list was nearly empty. That's when I realized how much of her identity was built on other people's accomplishments. Margaret herself maintained strategic distance sending, impersonal birthday cards to the grandchildren, making brief appearances at family events. Her performance of martyrdom was Oscar-worthy, but found little audience. The family had seen behind the curtain. The most profound changes came with my grandchildren. Emma, who'd innocently exposed Margaret's lie about the quilt, now spent Tuesday afternoons in my craft room learning actual quilting techniques. "Grandma Evie," she asked one day, fingers carefully guiding fabric under the sewing machine needle. "Why did Grandma Margaret say she made things when she didn't?" I considered my answer carefully. Some people feel so empty inside that they borrow other people's accomplishments to feel important. Emma nodded sagely. Like when Lizzie at school says she wrote songs that are really Taylor Swift's. Exactly like that, I laughed, but grown-ups should know better. 6 months after the confrontation, Catherine arrived at my door clutching a package wrapped in familiar silver paper. "It's from Margaret," she said, bewilderment in her voice. Inside was my mother's hand-painted violet sewing basket, the one that had disappeared from my craft room, with a stiffly worded note. "This belongs with you, Margaret." Not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement. Progress of a sort. Tom and Catherine established clear rules with both sets of grandparents. When the twins had their school art show, both grandmothers attended on opposite sides of the gymnasium. When Emma won a ribbon for her first quilt square, Margaret actually clapped, though her smile looked medically necessary. "Margaret showed up at my women's group yesterday," my neighbour Judy reported over coffee. "She's taking a beginning quilting class with Pastor Abernathy's wife. Made a potholder that looked like it had been through a blender, poor thing, but she owned it as her first attempt. First time I've ever heard her admit to being a beginner at anything." Christmas brought the ultimate test. The entire extended family gathered at Catherine and Tom's new home. I'd made stockings for everyone. Margaret brought store-bought cookies with a bakery label she pointedly did not remove. "Mom made these," she announced when offering them, gesturing at the label. "The bakery owner, I mean, not me." Frank looked at her with a mixture of surprise and pride. Later, as family members relaxed in post-dinner contentment, Margaret approached where I sat, helping Emma thread her needle. "That quilt," she said abruptly, nodding toward my creation displayed on the living room wall. "It's quite beautiful." "Thank you," I replied. "I could never make something like that," she continued, words seeming to catch in her throat. "Not without lessons," I agreed pleasantly. She met my eyes briefly, years of complex emotions passing between us. Would you consider teaching a beginner? Someone with very little natural talent, but willing to learn?" Around us, conversation quieted. Catherine froze mid-sentence, watching us. "I teach beginners every Wednesday at the community centre," I said evenly. "Anyone is welcome to join." Margaret nodded once sharply and moved away. She showed up the following Wednesday, sitting at the back of the class, struggling with basic stitches but stubbornly persisting. We didn't become friends. Some bridges, once burned, leave only charred remnants. But we found a fragile peace built on honesty, rather than illusion. That night, as I journaled about the day's events, a habit I'd maintained for 60 years, I found myself writing. Standing up for your work isn't just about recognition. It's about honoring the hours of your life poured into creation. At 67, I finally learned that my truth matters, my work matters, and I matter, labels or no labels. My hands, still nimble despite arthritis, closed my journal. Margaret would never fully apologize. Some people can't bear to face their reflections. But I'd shown my daughter, my grandchildren, and most importantly myself, that at any age, it's never too late to speak your truth and reclaim your story.